Hey guys, welcome to our video on ancient Greece number 3. So where we left off last time, we were talking about the Dorians, and we said the Dorians were a group who took over Greece during this time period after the Mycenaean civilization fell apart. Okay, and we said that the Dorians kind of did the same thing that the Mycenaeans did. They were all caught up in this idea of land. So they're going to focus everything on the military instead of on farming and on trading and on the skilled jobs. And we said that during this time frame, Greece and the area surrounding Greece is going to enter into a phrase or a time frame called the Dark Ages. So the Dark Ages, if we remember, is that time when everything slowed down. Trading stopped, writing stopped, people were poor. Farmers were subsistence farmers, only producing food for themselves. The one thing that came out of the Dark Ages was iron. Iron was a very good metal. It was cheap because it was so abundant in the land, and it was stronger than bronze. So iron is going to replace bronze as the metal used for all weapons. So as the Dorians came in and took over all of Greece, okay, they're still going to be focused on that military adventure. How much land can we get to get all these resources? Now, over time, what's going to happen is the Dorians are going to come to an end because you cannot simply focus everything on the military. It's just not going to work. So as the Dorians collapsed, okay, those people that fled the Greece mainland because the Dorians were out to get land and kill the people there and so on, in 750 BC, they're going to return. Okay, and they're going to develop these small communities all along Greece, all led by kings. So we're going to go back to kind of like the Mycenaean era, where the kings are going to live like on the palaces on the hill, and the nobles are going to rule the land around. Okay, so during this time, they're going to call themselves the hellenes. All right, so the hellenes is simply a word that we translate to Greek, which is where the word Greece comes from today. So the Hellenists are going to come back and they're going to, start farming, and they're going to realize that since they're not focused so much on the military, the farmers are going to be pretty prosperous. They're going to produce more food than what they even need. So we said that when you have more than what you need, you tend to trade. So trading is going to start picking back up at this time. So they're going to start trading, and their two main trading partners at this time are going to be the Egyptians, who are in Africa, and the Phoenicians, who are in Asia. So as they start trading with the Egyptians and Phoenicians, the idea of trading products and record keeping is going to come back, so writing is going to come back. So the Hellenists are going to decide that instead of developing their own unique language just to Greece, why not adopt one of their trading partners to make trade much more easy? So what they're going to do is adopt the Phoenician alphabet at this time. Okay, the Phoenician alphabet is going to help with trade. It's going to make reading and writing more beneficial. It's easier and so on. So if we look at the Phoenician alphabet, similar to ours, not super similar, but there are some similarities. They have 24 letters where we have 26. Since everybody is using letters and creating words, it makes reading and writing more simple. It made trade a lot easier and so on. In this photo on the top, those are the 24 letters of the Phoenician alphabet. So we can see there are like some similarities in design to our letters, but not necessarily that they're correlating. The one that I see, that correlates pretty decent is the Z. That looks about like ours, but the rest of the letters do not. Okay, but record keeping became easier at this time. Now, since we have a pretty good system of writing, okay, what's going to happen is that this written record keeping is going to replace the oral history. So up until this time, oral history is what the Greeks depended on. So these stories of the past were passed down typically by a person who was called a bard. A bard would be a person that would go out like into the marketplace and they would tell the stories of the past. Now the bard's job is to tell the stories of the past, okay, but they needed to keep an audience. So oftentimes those stories of the past were twisted a little bit, given a little bit more adventure, made them more exciting. And the problem with oral history then is that they're not completely accurate, because to keep that audience entertained, you're going to add in things to keep them that way. So those traditional stories are going to be somewhat inaccurate because of all the adventure that they put in. Okay, with the written record keeping they have now, okay, now what they're going to have is written history, providing much more accurate stories of what was going on in the time period. So as time goes on, and we have these farmers being prosperous and they started up trade and so on, what they're going to notice is that as time goes on, their population is going to increase. And if your population increases, you need more food to supply the population. The problem was that in these little communities that they had, they didn't have any more land. Okay, so the farmers couldn't keep up because they had no more land to plant crops on. They're kind of like topped out. They just couldn't do it anymore. Okay, so the need of land is going to become apparent, but the problem is they didn't want to fight over land, okay, because they knew that fighting over land took away from the farmers and the trade. Okay, so what they decided to do is send out people to find new land, land that wasn't owned by another person that wouldn't get them into a conflict. So as they sent these people out, and they typically travel quite a bit outside their area to find that land, and they're going to establish a colony. So in this new land, they're going to say, well, we claim this as ours. This is our land. This is our colony. It's owned by Greece. Okay, so were there no people on this land? That's not necessarily true either. They did have a native population, and most of them during this time period are going to be taken in as slaves to work. This is really when the slave idea becomes more apparent. The slave trade starts happening at this time and so on. So these colonies are going to be outside of the Greece area. Most of them are going to be by the Mediterranean Sea, off towards the European area, and the Black Sea, which is over by Asia. Okay, so as they gain more land, okay, and they're going to be spread out, the Greek culture is going to spread, okay, because now they own land, like 1,000 miles over there, and they're going to be Greek. So now the Greek language is going to spread. The different religions are going to spread. So in Italy and France, parts of Africa and Asia, we do see Greek heritage in those areas, and it's simply because, okay, of the colonies. Okay, and colonies are going to keep up from this time period all the way through the 18 and early 1900s. So as the colonies are established and they have this new land, now they have more resources. And with those resources, they can trade even more products. So at this time, they're going to keep trading, and they're going to trade from their colonies to the Greek mainland with the Egyptians, with the Phoenicians, and they're going to ship out things like grains, slaves, timber, fish, and so on. In return, they were able to receive like olive oil, wine, pottery, and so on. Now, as time goes on, they're going to realize that since they have so many products to trade, bartering actually becomes quite a bit more difficult. So let's say your area had a lot of iron, which is very valuable, okay, and this area had olive oil. Well, how much olive oil does it take to get 3 pounds of iron? That's becoming a little bit more shady. Bartering is going to become more difficult. So the Greeks are going to say, well, what's an easier way? What could we do different? So this was the time that they're going to create actual money. So instead of bartering goods, they're going to place a value on iron. Okay, and if you want it, you're going to have to pay for it. Okay, so with the use of their metals, the first money is going to become apparent in the world. Okay, so we have these Greek coins there on the top. Okay, so what's going to happen? They're going to expand their trade. They place value on it. So things that were very valuable, they're going to get more money for and become more wealthy. So wealth is now going to be determined in the amount of money you have instead of the types of products you have. So there's a difference between now and the past. Okay, since we have that value on goods, okay, this idea of supply and demand is going to start. So if Greece had something that everybody wanted, they could put a high value on that because they know the people are going to pay for it. If they have something that everybody has, the value is going to be lower because it's not in much of a demand. Now, as time goes on, okay, what we're going to notice with Greece is that they control this area. This is Greece, and we have these kings that control this land. Okay, but the problem is all these little areas of land are very independent from one another because physical features really keep them separated. So we have a community here, and then we have a mountain range. Okay, and then another community and another mountain range, and then an island, and all these communities are so different. So where you live, your king might not even live by you, and what they're going to notice is that these citizens felt really loyal to their community, not to Greece. Okay, so what ends up happening, those nobles that control the land decided that why are we obeying the king when we control this land anyways? Let's overthrow the king and let's be the leaders. So the nobles are going to overthrow the kings, and now we're going to have all these nobles ruling in Greece. So we have all of Greece, and now we're going to have 15 different leaders. Okay, so these 15 leaders controlled their own land, but if Greece was attacked, all 15 leaders would have to get together and make decisions, which becomes quite messy. So these nobles are going to take over their own land, and they're going to develop something called a city-state. Okay, a city-state would be like states that we have in our country. Okay, but they're going to call them polises. So the city-state contained where the noble lived, okay, and then the area around it. Okay, that's going to be their polis, their area that they control. Now, if we look at these polis, they really existed like separate little countries. They didn't work together. It's not like one polis would work with another polis and work together for the greater good. They're going to worry about themselves, and that's going to become a problem as time goes on. So if we look at these polises and how they're set up, okay, all polises had some same features, most of them dealing with the government and then where the people were. So the polis was where the government was held, okay, that's your center, that's where the noble would live. Each polis had an acropolis. An acropolis is like in the photo on the top there. Okay, an acropolis had a couple different purposes. One being protection. Okay, so the acropolis was located on top of the hill. Okay, and if their area was attacked, the people could go there for safety and hide in the acropolis while the guards protected the area. Okay, the acropolis would be difficult to get to, okay, again, because it's on that hilltop. So it's going to take a lot of people to actually invade that area. The Acropolis was also a place where you could honor your local gods. So if we look at Greece with mythology, in the Acropolis they would have a lot of different dedications to like Athena and Persephone, Zeus, and so forth. Outside the Acropolis area was an area called the Agora. This was like an open place. Number one, it served as a marketplace. So people would go there to sell their products, very similar to the farmers market by festival that we have, like during the summer, you can go there and buy, fresh goods and so on. Okay, so the Agora is a marketplace used to sell goods. The other part of the Agora, which is not like our farmers market, it's also used as like a debate area. People would debate certain topics that they were upset with in their polis. They would elect their officials there. They would pass laws there. So it really had that government aspect to it as well. Now, if we look at the areas around the polis, that's going to be like the neighborhood. So we have like the Acropolis on the top, we have the Agora just outside, and then we have the village surrounding it. This whole area is considered part of the polis. Okay, so if we look at Wisconsin, we have our state government in Madison, we have the areas of high concentration of population around, but the whole state is Wisconsin. Kind of the same idea as a polis. Okay, with the mountains, these polises were somewhat small. Okay, so mountain ranges really determined your boundary because on the other side of the mountain was a different polis. Okay, so some were small and the populations are going to vary. Athens at this time had one of the largest. They had about 300,000 people. That's pretty big. Others were much more tiny. And I think we're going to stop here because we're just going to be about 12 and a half minutes, it says. So we'll continue on with the polises in Ed Puzzle number 4.